Thanks for helping in the garden. I'll show you around just to start with what's in the shed. So you got the combination to the shed. There's a padlock on the shed. Just open it, lock it when you're done. Inside our shed, we've got hand pruners there and hand tools down here, and all the other big tools that you might want to use. If you get a tool really dirty, we've got these brushes right here. These barbecue type brushes to scrape off tools. And down here there's larger tools like loppers and things like that. In this section it's more instructional materials and some irrigation repair stuff, which you probably won't need any of that. Down here there are power tools, and we do have power in our garden. It comes from this green cord that comes from the neighbors. And then the umbrellas, if you want to have a picnic, you could set those out if needed, and more instructional lesson materials, which you probably won't be needing, but feel free to use the pencils or whatever you want to have fun in the garden. If you need string or twine for any reason, it's all right down there. That's kind of our string and twine bucket, and there's screws and such down there. One thing to do to keep kids engaged is they can do the weather log, and I'll put a link to the video so you can watch how to do that. So here we're in the far end of the garden that's away from the school, and in this zone what you could be doing is just deadheading flowers, and I'll show you what that means. It means cutting off spent flowers. Here's an example of a flower that is dead and we don't need it, and by cutting that off we're encouraging new blooms. So deadheading is just removing old spent flowers. We always encourage you too to cut a bouquet. The more we cut, the more flowers that will come back. So once again, in this flower zone over here, lots of dead flowers to cut off. If you feel real inspired, all these sweet peas, these purple sweet peas, they need some trellising. And you'll find maybe some poles next to the shed there, or next to the greenhouse here we have bamboo. So if you wanted to make some sort of structure, you can make a trellis and try to get these peas up on the trellis with some twine that I showed you in the shed. This lemon verbena plant, which is in the back of the garden, is really great for herb tea and such, so feel free to take some of that home. In this bed we've got some carrots, which you might find some that are good to harvest, and down the middle of the bed we have some different types of zucchini and squash. There are also some sunflowers mixed in here, like these guys right there. But beyond the sunflowers, squash, and carrots, if you find some parsley, which is this stuff right here, you can either take that home and eat it or just weed it and get rid of it. The parsley's all over, so weeding out parsley would be a good thing to do in this bed. The cucumbers and squash are these guys right there, and we want to leave these, and soon we'll put some trellising up for them as well. So leave the squash, pull out everything else except the carrots and the sunflowers. If you have some greens at home, you can bring them here to feed our worms. I'll show you how. To feed our worms, we just remove the bricks and rocks that are holding down the tarp, and then you'd lay some green leafy material or vegetable material on the soil. And we do have critters that have been stealing things from our worms, so really think about laying the bricks back down. Next to the worms here is this chamomile, which is great for tea if you want to harvest some of those flowers and steep them at home. And behind it's lemon balm, which also makes a great tea. Feel free to harvest as much as you want. This chamomile eventually will die, so might as well take it. Our plum tree here next to our little outdoor covered area is full of fruit, and lots of fruit is dropping. One thing you can do is collect the fruit that's fallen on the ground and bring it over here to the compost zone, which is a space where you can take anything that you cut, like spent flowers and the such, and add it to the compost on this side here. Don't put any of that nasty grass that grows in our garden called kikuyu grass. I'll show you what that is. This grass here, which is all around the edge of our garden, is called kikuyu grass. This should not go in the compost by any means. It's our #1 pest. If you happen to dig up kikuyu grass, there's some barrels right next to the front of the garden. Nasty weeds could go over here, and we'll get them dumped. So these here are our production beds, and we got a lot of tomatoes and winter squash in here, and some dahlia flowers. So feel free to cut the dahlias, deadhead them, cut some sweet peas, take them home, deadhead them. Over here there's calendula back there that could be deadheaded and cut. But everything else in this garden is pretty much here to stay over the summer. There is some lettuce and chard and kale that you can eat, as it looks good to be eaten. Besides that, these beds are just gonna hopefully grow and be here for us in the fall. Some more good flowers to harvest to take bouquets are all along this area. And these alstroemerias are definitely great cut flowers. A great way to harvest these is to find a flower stem and just pull the whole stem out, and that encourages new growth. You can cut off the parts you don't want, put them in the compost over there. So the early summer, there's not too much to do, just a little bit of weeding, harvesting, deadheading flowers. But this bed here, number 7, this bed we're going to be clearing out. So feel free to take whatever you want out of this bed. We're going to be pulling it out and putting new gopher wire in the bottom of it. So harvest lots of flowers and chard, and we'll be digging this one out soon and putting new wire underneath. There are a few places that can use some hand watering, and you'll find the watering cans over here and a faucet there. We also have some hoses throughout the garden, but let me show you the areas to be hand watered. Any spot in the garden that you find a blue flag, like these here, those are all good things to water by hand, about once a week. So if you're coming, couldn't hurt to give them some water. In the front of our garden here, where the steps go down, these containers and these little status flower plants, these little dudes right here, they all could be watered by hand as well. The rest of the garden is on irrigation and should be taking care of itself through the battery-powered timer. That's about it, unless you really want to go gangbusters and pull out some of this kikuyu grass that's along this fence line, or the kikuyu grass that's starting to creep over our kikuyu grass barrier. Once again, if you pull kikuyu grass, you could stack it up in this zone by the front gate. We also have a lot of kikuyu grass along the back fence line, which if you went on the other side of the fence and pulled the kikuyu grass out, would be very helpful. Thanks for helping in the garden. Last thing I failed to mention is our greenhouse. Now, our greenhouse is on a timer to keep our little baby plants alive, and that comes from this faucet here. So don't ever turn that faucet off, and that's why we put this in here, to remind you not to turn it off. Once a week, you could turn this hose on by turning that way. See, on the Y, when that's in line with the flow, it fills that hose. And this hose could be used to water our succulents, which don't need to be as watered as much as everything else. So we only need to hit these guys once a week. And the succulents that are over there as well. In these summer months, it's okay to just leave this greenhouse door open so it doesn't get too hot in our greenhouse. When you're done watering, you can turn this hose off. But always leave this side on, because this has a timer that waters everything that's on this side of our greenhouse.